Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. So today's upload is going to be a video about a pattern, a certain setup across North America that if it does occur, and the confidence at this point is relatively high, if it does occur, then we could be looking at an extremely interesting winter and a lot of, I guess, exciting weather events, if you will. So if you like anything weather related, please subscribe. I do all sorts of weather related content, long range forecasts. I track severe thunderstorms, storms, the winter outlooks, all that fun stuff. So consider subscribing. Also, if you'd like to become a patron of this channel, that basically means that you get a few bucks. You give me a little piece of donation for maybe $1 or $2, and in return you get my Patreon exclusive content. The link is in the description box below, so consider doing that as well. So today's upload is going to be, again, about the pattern. So I have GFS model pulled up. That's not really anything to do with what today's video is. I just wanted to show you one thing, that there's a new GFS that's going to be coming out soon. It's the GFS Parallel, and you can see it's GFS Para. Okay, so this is basically the upgraded GFS, and it will be the main one in the future. But as of now, it's just temporarily being shown in Tropical Tidbits. It's very delayed, and some of it's missing. So it's just kind of exciting to see a new GFS upgrade coming in. We've had it a few years ago, a little previous one. So let's go to the PowerPoint presentation brought to you by the NOAA, and let's look at what we have here. So if you were to look at the ENSO, again, this is the pattern that we're talking about is a potential La Nina. Okay, so basically, if a La Nina were to occur, we could be looking at a very interesting winter. So now let's take a look at this, right? And let's just dissect this. So ENSO neutral is most likely to continue through the northern hemisphere summer 2020. So most of summer will remain in the ENSO neutral, but with the look at this, with roughly equal chances of ENSO neutral, so staying the same, or developing into a La Nina beginning in August through the October timeframe 2020. So in that timeframe, August through October, it will be decisive, and it will be kind of like that breakthrough, whether it will be a neutral or a La Nina. And again, if a La Nina were to form, we could be looking at a very interesting winter, and there could be a lot of exciting things. Of course, a neutral winter is also, more exciting than an El Nino, but a La Nina hasn't occurred in a few years, so that'd be pretty interesting to see how that impacts. And notice that these are the models by the Climate Prediction Center models, the 3.4 sea surface temperature model, and you can see that right now we are getting close to La Nina. We are in the lower partial of the neutral, and you can see that anywhere below that line is La Nina, and you can see some models definitely dip below that. They are trending further and further to the south with each update, and this was last updated June 19th. And notice that they bring it back up. By then, we will see what will be going on. That's too far out. We're just concerned about this time frame. And notice that there's some models bringing it into a very strong La Nina, while some are bringing it barely to an El Nino. So it's not a question of El Nino or La Nina. It's a question between neutral or La Nina. So at least we don't have an El Nino this year, which would have been our fairly, I guess, a boring winter. Again, if there's a weak El Nino, there's still a lot of exciting things, but usually it's just not known to be a brutal winter. Now, if you were to look at the this is the 22nd of June update, so literally 4 days ago as I'm speaking. These are the CFS version 2 ensemble model average. Notice we are again in that lower partial of that neutral, and if this were to go further and further down as the mean is showing by that by those dashed lines, we could definitely be looking at a very strong La Nina, a -1 to a -1.5 possibly of a La Nina, which would be a strong La Nina. And again, now you may be wondering, what's so exciting about this? What's so special about this La Nina? Why is it so much different from a neutral? Well, first of all, let's look at some of the impacts of the La Nina, what a typical La Nina pattern does if it were to form. So let's take a look at this picture. La Nina, this is by NOAA, and you can see it has a jet stream that rides to the north, so generally a little bit warm by the Gulf of Alaska right there, by the Aleutian Islands right here, but it would be very chilly across eastern or western Canada and eastern Alaska and parts of the Pacific Northwest. And the thing is that this cold air, stretches out oftentimes into parts of the Midwest and into even parts of the Northeast, but generally it is more concentrated across the Northwest. Now, what does this mean? You can see it's wet and cold, so increased snowfall for the West. That would be very exciting for the ski resorts, for snow lovers. Again, ski resorts this year may or may not be immensely impacted by the COVID-19. We'll have to see about that. That's it's tough to say whether or not that will be a huge playing factor. At this point, it seems it will be. But notice, drier across the south, so that's definitely not good, really, right? But this is where things get interesting. So there will be a lot of Alberta Clippers with this La Nina. As these, across this cold air and cold and wet air, we see these little storms riding along. That brings, plenty of snow to the Midwest. And the more exciting thing is across the Northeast. Now, the Northeast, La Nina usually favors not too warm or not too cold of an air. Usually, an end zone neutral favors more cold air for for the Northeast. But don't get deceived by that. Just because it is a colder pattern doesn't mean that's more snowy, and that's really what people get excited about. With the La Nina, we see wet and warm conditions often colliding across the Northeast, and just because the cold air isn't there during the winter doesn't mean it's not going to be below 32 degrees. It doesn't say it's really above average across the Northeast. It's above average across the Southeast and the Mid-Atlantic possibly, but that could still lead to some pretty large storms riding up the Northeast coast. And those storms could be pretty powerful. They may not be the most snowy, maybe not be too awfully snowy because of the lack of cold air, but in a dead of winter, February, January, even into March, we could be looking at some pretty nice storms. Now, if you are wondering, oh, well, what, how do you know, can you give us an example of a previous winters that had a snowy Northeast? Well, let's go to some of the years past. 2017 to 2018. Notice that it was a La Nina, and it was a pretty strong line. It wasn't really awfully powerful, but it was there. It got to that 1 point mark you could see, and it extended through about March and ended in April and May. It was a La Nina, a classic La Nina setup. So, if you recall what happened across 2017, 2018 across the Northeast, especially late spring, there were 4 nor'easters that affected the Northeast in literally 22 days. There was the March 3rd through 1st through 3rd, 6th through 8th, 12th to 4th, and there was just so much snow. I remember actually making the videos about those storms, and everybody was, just absolutely stunned by how many snowstorms there were in such a small amount of time. And notice that the damage was ridiculous from some of them. This was just one snowstorm, $2.2 billion. That's probably mainly, the flooding that occurred and a lot of the erosion that occurred across the shore. And there's whole Wikipedia articles about this because of just how immensely that was. And the Northeast was relatively quiet, but it wasn't really dry in terms of snow. But notice that you can see that the late winter was really just an absolute frenzy for the nor'easters, and that just goes to show you that if you have a pattern that is favorable, you could just go absolutely from a below average season, which at this point I don't recall. I mean, for different locations it's probably a different story. The Northeast wasn't terribly below average at that point. It was probably running below average in terms of snowfall, but I mean, this definitely brought many locations way above average in terms of snowfall because of these just giant nor'easters. And again, these nor'easters are basically they occurred during the La Nina pattern. So, just because it's a La Nina doesn't mean it's not going to be snowy for you across the Northeast. I got a few comments saying that, oh, I hope it's not a La Nina because we live in the Northeast. If you like the cold, the La Nina may not be that good for you, but most weather fans that I talk to, they like cold to a certain extent, but they much rather would prefer snow, and that's more what you would get with a La Nina rather than like a neutral. Okay, so this is definitely something exciting. And also, again, I forgot to mention the Alberta Clippers, plenty of snow across the mountains, and a little bit drier for probably Southern California, which would be a little bit unfortunate in the south. That doesn't mean, though, that some snowstorms would be able to happen. Let's go into some previous years. But if you were to look at the 2008, 2009, those were La Nina years. and those were some pretty tough years. 2008 winter was above average for a good portion. Now again, 2009 was also a snowy winter, but it was an El Nino, so you can see this doesn't really hold true. The El Nino boring pattern doesn't hold true through all winters. But this, we've hadn't really had much La Ninas in the past. If you look at this, we've had, this winter, 2008, 2009, we had 2010, 2011, 2011, 2012, which, let me tell you that 2010, 2011 was there was one of the biggest blizzards ever that occurred across the Midwest, the Groundhog Day blizzard. That's really the blizzard that pushed me into that, like, boundary of really loving weather. I mean, I already was a weather fan. I loved it. I mean, I was in 3rd grade. I remember I was so obsessed with it, and I found it quite weird because no one else my age liked it, and no one still does my age, really. At least that I know of from, I know there's people out there because I've seen, through comments, younger people being excited about weather, but, that's it. Those are across the whole country, not in my school or in my friend group. So that blizzard was really that pushed me into loving weather, and I remember we got 24 inches of snow from that blizzard within, I think it was 18 hours. So it was just a absolute memory that I'll never forget, and that was during the La Nina winter. Also very cold. We've had just insane snows that winter. I think we got up to 60 inches of snow that year in Chicago, which our average is around 35, so almost double. And then, the infamous winters of 2013, 2014 was a neutral. So even if the La Nina doesn't occur, look at that. 2013, 2014 was just an absolute hog. No other words to put it. It was one of the toughest winters on record. It was our second snowiest season ever recorded in Chicago. It was, I think, 82.1 inches, something like that, of snow, and our average is 30. So it's, winters can be varying, and it doesn't necessarily rely on a La Nina, but a La Nina often times does give us a pretty good shot of cold and snowy conditions across the United States during wintertime. So that's just kind of what I wanted to talk about and to show you. So guys, stay hopeful about the winter. Despite though more like the summer and fall being probably more likely warmer than cold, it looks as if winter may be chilly, chillier compared to average than summer fall was. So thank you guys so much for watching. Consider liking the video, consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode. See ya. Bye.